if you don't have a script, you need to have some other kind of asset attached to your book in order to get people interested. And if it's money, well, you can't really get financing without like a star, but you can't really reach out to a star without a script. So it's like, how does this actually happen on your end? You know?
Spot on. It's that is exactly this is exactly the crisis I dealt with when I was, in my 20s and
Well, thanks a lot for doing this.
yeah, no, thank you for reaching out. It's good to meet you.
I mean, like, I probably, I think if I go through my timeline, it's about 7 or 8 years ago, whenever you were releasing the your at least the first book I knew of, writing for the Greenlight. I think I
Uh-huh.
saw you on Film Courage or something like that. And that time I hadn't really done anything that I really do now, which is like mostly in like the comic book industry. I was mainly writing screenplays, and like most people that get into it, you have sort of an illusion of how the film industry works. And I think your book was the first one that like suddenly everything clicked. And I was just like, "Oh, it doesn't work the way I thought it did." And
Yeah.
at least as far as like the idea that you finish a script and then you find somebody, or there's somebody that then just like takes it from there. And it's as if there's people that are just trying to find the perfect script. And
Right.
then like the way you explained it was like, oh man, the whole backwards in kind of thing. So since then, I then discovered you had multiple other books that dive even deeper into the whole back end of the things. And now this is kind of my whole wheelhouse, is really learning the business side of all everything in entertainment, from publishing to obviously film and stuff. And now I'm trying to dive a bit deeper into the film side, and I've been having more and more people in the indie film industry on my channel, which is why I reached out and was like, this is the kind of the person that broke me into like really learning the business. I really feel like your books are like the best ones out there that really explain kind of the whole mechanics of the business of film out there. There's a bunch that are on the front end that show you like kind of, I don't know, the art of writing and filmmaking, their techniques and stuff, but not much that's like the nitty gritty of kind of the more legal and business savvy side. So I'll stop talking for a while, and I'll just have you, I guess, fill me in on a background of your career history, and then I'll get to the questions I have for you.
Oh, that's fine. Look, I appreciate all the kind words. So really simple filter for me has always been I all the books that I'm writing, and I'm working on the new one now, as you asked about in the LinkedIn
Yeah.
conversation. But I'm really just writing the books that I wish existed when I was starting out. I just I you know to give some background, I fell in love with the whole idea. Like when I found out you could actually have a job in movies, that was a very amazing day for me, and I was probably seven. Like wow, you can get paid doing this. This is amazing. And I would absorb books like biographies on the usual suspect directors, so Scorsese, Tarantino, Spielberg, everybody. And it's like they always have this like, oh, they got involved in movies at a young age, and then like, they came up with an idea, and then they found $2 million and made their first movie. And I was like, hold on, like you just like put like a lot of information in one sentence, and like let's unpack that. And nobody ever did, and I never found those answers when I was starting out. So okay, background on me, I grew up in Ohio in the Midwest, fell in love with movies, and had horrible grades and wound up at a film school in Dayton, Ohio, and learned a lot because it was sort of like a very scrappy upstart film program, So it's like our equipment was quite old and battered. We were happy if the lights turned on. Learned a lot about just energetically making films happen. And uh, it's not like I graduated all that long ago, but we were actually shooting movies on film. So like I really got to experience that pivot from from analog to digital and all that.
Yeah.
And I came out to LA very early 2000s, like ready to take on the industry and thought I knew how it all worked. And like, same deal, had scripts, had all that stuff ready to like make movies. And just absolutely got smacked in the face with reality in terms of, well, you don't just go to Sony and fill out an application. Like
Yeah, yeah.
how do you break that wall? And that was, I guess, the biggest problem I had starting out was like I could be a PA on set, but like all you do is sort of like take the garbage out. And how do you become how do you become that person who walks onto set who's dressed nicely and everyone like acts nice to them? Like how do you become that person? And weirdly, I eventually in life sort of became one of
Became
those
that,
types of
yeah.
people. Yeah, so it's like full circle. And I've had stories where the directors of those movies that I was a PA on, and who weren't super nice to me, later at like a film festival were pitching me content, and it's like, do you remember we actually know each other? So it's like, I guess this is all to say, I found the answers to those mysterious questions, and it all
Yeah.
falls into one word: distribution. I fell into the business side of the industry, which is distribution. Distribution is taking your content and then putting it someplace where it can actually be monetized and figuring out how do you get this thing, a movie, and get it in front of people where they will pay money to see it in some capacity. And once I sort of literally stumbled into that world of just like, oh, there's a whole business here. And once I sort of started to learn the business side of it, I realized that answers every single question I ever wanted to know about the business. And as soon as I started to really like not just get the loose basics, but like truly grasp those answers. And look, suffice it to say, I always had a goal in life of like it'd be great to write a book. I always envisioned that I'd be some novelist, but I'm not a novelist. But it's like I was like, this information would have been very valuable to me, and if it would have been valuable to me, I'm certain that there are other people who want to get into this industry who are asking those same questions. Not the loosey goosey, I want to be the next, fill in the name multi-million-dollar director, but more like I just want to build a career and make movies. Like
Yeah.
that's what it's trying to be.
Yeah, and that's to kind of fill in it. That's what I think sort of the broader people. I mean, I grew up, not to dive into my background, my audience like knows plenty about it, but it's like uh you kind of assume that everybody wants to make movies, or at least I did. So then as I like went through college and stuff and realized, no, actually it's just kind of a small group of us that really care about movies, and everyone else just is, it's kind of like there's just the big movies that they've ever heard of, and then there's like just low budget nothing, and there's nothing in between. It's either
Yeah.
big Hollywood or just some kind of person that made something on their camcorder, and like the idea of like independent film, it was just sort of like a gray zone that no one understood except for us who were trying to get into film. And I think that that's where I latched on to like your books and stuff, to because it basically explains just sort of that the bulk of the industry that we think of like getting our movies made is not a part of the grand scheme that everybody thought of, or definitely not the old way of things, of where you hear the classic stories of like the Tarantinos get just making their debut and then like kind of going off from there, Robert Rodriguez, and we're all just trying to figure out, or at least like my network is like, just how do you make a living making movies or writing books, or like how do you just, it doesn't have to be the greatest thing out there, but like, how do you get it onto a streaming platform? Even if it's not Netflix, how do you get it onto all these other ones? Or how, just kind of the actual process of going through that. And so it's cool to know that now that there is a process that is just like in, to fill people or like you in a bit of, in the comic book industry, it's exactly the same, to where the bulk of people only know of Marvel and DC. And there's dozens of independent comic book publishers that publish the, the majority of us that call ourselves in the comic industry, that's where we go. Small press publishers and bigger independent publishers. And some of us can't distinguish, or we often argue about, some independent publishers, just like indie film studios, are so big that you might as well classify them as sort of the mainstream or something like that. But if you're talking to people that are active in this space, they sort of lump it all together. But most of us are just trying to figure out, how do I build an audience? How do I get it through any form of, like, just how do I get a book on the shelves? And in this case, how do I get a movie distributed? And now that kind of brings me to where I'm at now, because uh especially with, I can't remember one of your books, but it's basically just kind of in general, you talk about how movies are made, or sort of, there's not even a script written when kind of the project is being in development. So that's kind of where I'm at, to like, can you explain sort of what is the process? And like, for example, of us that are writers, or writers that are also sort of producers of their own content, what is it that, what's kind of the first step? Like, I think that's where, like, kind of the biggest gap, at least for me, is it seems like everything's a catch 22. It's like you can't really have a, like, it seems like if you don't have a script, you need to have some other kind of asset attached to your book in order to get people interested. And if it's money, well, you can't really get financing without, like, a star, but you can't really reach out to a star without a script. So it's like, how does this actually happen on your end? That's
So
what I'm at.
spot on. It's that is exactly this is exactly the crisis I dealt with when I was, in my 20s, and not to age myself, but 20 years ago. So it hasn't changed at all. That's okay. This is the critical thing for your audience. I think anybody starting their career today is just to, like, take a deep breath. The deck is not stacked against you today. It feels like it is because there's, like, so much more information and so much noise out there, but, like, it's just always been hard as hell. But let's break down what you asked, because I think that is precisely what I learned, and I had to learn it the hard way. And that's sort of the purpose of a lot of what I write about, is to sort of simplify that. So, okay, in distribution, okay, in traditional film school, we'll say the traditional film logic is you go script to screen. You write, you come up with an idea, you write the script, you go out to the market with the script and say, I want to produce this film. You find investors, they give you money, you produce the film, you finish the film, and then you send it to film festivals, and it's so magical and amazing that everyone lines up and says, we want to buy your movie, and you sit back and relax while agents fight and lawyers argue, and then all of a sudden, like, people are just handing you bags of money, and studios are saying, would you like to produce the next one? That's the vision we're told, and it's 100% not true. So I love the concept of reverse engineering everything in life. And that's how I think you need to think about the filmmaking process. So by reverse engineering, it's not thinking, what is the movie I want to make? It's the step beyond that. It's, where is the movie going to live where people are going to watch it? So it's what are the, okay, if it's horror films, if it's family films, if it's whatever genre, where do people go to watch it? And start there and then reverse your way back. And what I mean by that is, like, how many movies are they putting up? What kinds of audiences are watching those films? What are the commonalities between those movies? Are they all running times of about this length? Are they more creature features? Are they more this? Are they more that? If a family film is there, like, what kind? Is it a co-viewing so it's starting at that end point and then reversing backwards. So, to your point, if you're coming at this as a screenwriter, that's one path. If you're coming at it as a producer, even if you're writing your own scripts, that would be a second path. And here's how I would approach that. There are gatekeepers to these outlets. You know, Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to generally just go up and say, I want to produce this. But the gatekeepers are what I do, distributors. There's not many of us. There's a handful of us. And I'll tell you what, we are desperate for content. And we love to have conversations with producers who come to us with this proposal. And the proposal is this: I want to make a movie. It's going to be a genre you already work in. So it's interesting. Uh, I have money, but I need your help to tell me what movie to make. So now all of a sudden it's like, okay, all right. So Max, I'm just going to use random examples here to keep it going. Let's say,
Okay.
Max, you and I are having this call, and it's an introductory type call. And on your side, you're basically saying, Scott, I want to produce a Christmas romance movie. Clearly, the company you're working for, I'm just a background of me. I'm currently the executive vice president of a company called Nicely Entertainment. We do produce about 30 movies a year, predominantly TV movies. A lot of them go to major broadcasters here in the US. We internationally distribute them to broadcasters in the UK and other countries. And we do a lot of business in the VOD space. So, your typical outlets, Tubi TV, Roku, all of those, Vizio, that we have our content pretty widely distributed, Hulu, and we do originals with partners. We do spec films, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the content we have would come from an individual like yourself, and we come on the call and you basically say, Scott, I have a great idea for some films. Here are the general broad brushstrokes, but what I really want to talk to you about is the distribution side. Will a company like yours, in this case, I'm saying Nicely Entertainment, but it could be any company, would you release a film of mine if I produce it and it meets all the market specs? And my answer would be, well, if it meets all the market specs, yeah, we're open to the conversation. And at which point we would have some creative direction with it that would allow us to actually, if we came up with a deal and we signed the rights, we could potentially even try to pre-sell it, but that's a very hard industry these days. But most importantly, you would have a distributor interested. And if you now go out to people with money and you're saying, we have a distribution deal or we have a distribution partner interested in releasing the film, now we can have a conversation about, well, what is the film worth? Like, what is it going to actually make in the marketplace? And an individual on the distribution side who actively brokers these deals would be able to have a meaningful conversation with yourself or with investors where they are going to say things like, the movie will make about this amount of money. So if you produce it at this amount of money, now we're all going to be in sync in terms of like how to produce it, what to produce it for, what it needs to look like, how many, and then you can build a script that matches that gets produced, that goes into it. So that would be the producing path. The writing
Okay.
path is a little bit different, and here's what the writing path would be. And that's you held up Writing for the Greenlight. This is the path for that one. You do have to go into the industry with spec scripts. You have to go out with writing samples. I recommend about 3 scripts, and I do recommend having them in about the same genre. If you're doing romance movies, like maybe 2 can be Christmas, 1 can just be like I don't know, fell in love in Hawaii. But it's like they're in the same category because then that shows you as a writer who knows how to deliver that category really well. The chances of you selling one of those scripts is like slim to nil, but the chance of you using those scripts to then go to production companies or distribution companies and say, I'm a writer available for hire, when a company like ours has those opportunities to like produce a film real quick, or has a producer with money who wants a film made, we can then go after a writer and say, okay, your spec scripts are great. Now, we need this exact movie done. This guy named Max Hoven wants to produce it. He's got, and we'll pay you X amount if you can write the script in like 3 days. That's an exaggeration, but
Yeah, yeah.
they are usually tight turnarounds of a few weeks and all of that. But it's like that's kind of the model. It's essentially just like think about, okay, and I love to use the analogy of like the grocery store. It's like you go into a grocery store, if you want cereal, you go into a specific aisle for it. And you look at the shelves, and the shelves all have stuff on it. And if one product is not selling, guess what? They get rid of it and they put something new there. they're going to put something up that they think has a high likelihood of selling well. And so they kind of think about at that space, if it's high up on the shelf, that's where adults are looking. If it's low down on the shelf, that's where kids are looking. So if something in the kids space is not selling well and they want to replace it with something else, they reverse engineer. We need a kid product here. So let's go back into our list of clients and think about who has that. So when you're a producer or a writer, you're delivering what the industry needs.
So is it common or even is it taboo for a writer to reach out directly to a distributor and say, this is the kind of stuff I write? Is this the kind of stuff that you're looking for? Or do they, is it kind of, or did the distributors sort of just ignore it if it's not through an agent? That's kind of the illusion, or that, or maybe it's not an illusion. That's just how we're kind of all taught to believe, that trying to reach out directly to people, especially as a writer, without representation is sort of a long shot, if worth it at all.
Well, it is a long shot. Okay, I would say this. I would say this. Okay, let's talk about agents.
Okay.
If you have no produced credits or very, very few, like I don't think an agent is necessarily worth it yet in your career. When you have enough jobs coming in or opportunities coming in, then having an agent really helps. But actually, sometimes signing on with an agent too early, just because you go back to your earlier question, like you just figure that you write the script and then it just sort of takes care of itself. And it's like, no, like agents and managers, they when they find talent that is really like just blatantly obvious and is going to, they'll certainly put a lot of time, effort into promoting that individual and getting their work out there. But let's be candid. Most of us fall at the top of the bell curve.
Hmm.
We're kind of, yeah, we're above average because we're outputting a lot of content, but, there's a lot of noise out there at the same time. So,
Yeah.
it's, you don't want to be on the low end of like awful content because yeah, that gets really noisy and it's not going to go anywhere. But if you're kind of like outputting at an average, it's you're not going to find. I'm not going to say never, but like agents aren't going to be there. Like I haven't sold a Max Hoven script, so I got to make sure that I get that done this month. No, they're going to say like, I want to make a lot of money this month. Who are the writers who are going to make that really easy for me? And so
Yeah.
here's what I find is I find a lot of agents pitching. I'm not talking CAA level stuff. I'm talking like lower tiered agents representing writers who are pitching content to me. It does happen. It usually comes to me in like a list of like, hey, I have 17 writers and here's, 50 story concepts that they're pitching. And then it's like, well, I kind of generally sort of ignore that email because it's like that's way too much information.
Yeah.
And if I do actually say I'm kind of interested in this one, then all of a sudden it's like they're asking us to pay a lot more revenue for the script because they have to factor in their own fees in there as well.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for us over time if we develop a good relationship with a writer uh, and they're willing to kind of work at our level and work in a way that's a little bit more fluid, open, and collaborative, let's say. Now, if you step it up and you're talking $3 million movies plus, 3 million plus, sure, you're going to start going through agencies and all that kind of stuff. When you're talking like sub $1 million movies, which by the way is like the majority of films that get produced,
Yeah.
no, you don't need all those extra hurdles and you don't need all those people wedging their feet in there for fees. So to answer your specific question, it's like, can you reach out? Totally. Yes, you can. But you should reach out when you're ready to reach out. And what I mean by that is like, don't reach out saying, "Hi, hello, can you take your time to talk to me about what you." It's like if you're reaching out with the expectation that, a very busy executive is going to just, you know, sit down and talk to you for 30 minutes while you pitch story ideas, that doesn't work. Now, but if you're going in saying, I now have, that's why I kind of say like you need about 2 to 3 scripts ready to go.
Yeah.
If you have those 2 to 3 scripts ready to go, and then you're kind of going in more like, I have 3 scripts. These are the kind of, here's the log line for each. you guys produce a lot of this stuff. I'd love to talk to somebody on your production team or your development team or whatever, about how I could be a writer for hire for you, or like somebody on, and you slowly build those kinds of relationships in terms of like, you know, just being kind of present and front and center with the individuals who are actually in those positions once in a while of like, holy shit, I need a script like right now. But
Yeah.
that's sort of the catch 22, is like you do have to kind of get out there and network and be friends. The problem, and I do write about this. I know I should know this, but like I forget which books I've written about this specifically in. I know in Writing for the Greenlight, I do mention it, and I think some of the others too. Mastering the Pitch, I think too. But it's like writers tend to hang out with writers and talk about writing stuff, and cinematographers tend to hang out with cinematographers talking about cinematographer stuff. We all do that. What's really hard and what's really critical is to break out of your comfort zone and start talking to people and meeting with people and collaborating with people who work in the business but have nothing to do with what you work in. That's
Yeah.
actually where you start to make those connections, because then all of a sudden it's like, I'm just throwing this out, but like, if somebody on the business side, they don't hang out with many writers. So the few that they do hang out with or they're connected to, they're more likely to get recommended.
Yeah, totally. I talk about the same thing in I wrote a book as well called Indie Comic Empire, producing comic books basically, and that's what I talk about, that not just for writers trying to get work or anything like that, but as also in the realm of trying to build your audience, because especially from a writer's perspective or an artist perspective, like you said, they're mainly just talking to other writers and artists and other independent writers and artists at their same level. Like if they're self-published or with a certain publisher, and no one's really broken out or to try to be like break away from the indie comic crowd and try start talking to people that write TV series. And because you've find out that kind of everybody's all involved in different pools, and that's actually how you start to break out of your circle and become better and bigger and like actually network, as opposed
Correct.
to just sort of staying in your bubble, talking about your bubble, and then just waiting and hoping. um but to get to, okay, we'll go back and I'll go from a writer's perspective again. So let's
Yeah.
just say it's cool that you like phrase it this way, because I'm now at the level to where I feel like I am comfortable to, as if I were my own avatar of the person you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, I have a handful of production ready screenplays, books to my name and stuff like that. Like I probably could start actually reaching out to people in the way that you talk about, to where it's like if you have a solid like what I guess you would say like production level, like it's well done, like you're ready to say, I have a portfolio. If you in your mind, like my parents used to always say, if Steven Spielberg called you today, what could you even show him? And it's like in that case, if you're a writer and you have good screenplays under your belt and anything, and it's like, so now you're ready to be like, this represents me, I think they're amazing. And let's just say you reach out to directly to a distributor that you think fits the mold, that's I guess put out films and stuff like that from in your wheelhouse, their genre matches yours. um so that's one thing. I guess that's step one from the writer's perspective. If as a producer though, you were saying, and I've heard, actually got this like back, if I were to go to a distributor and say, I'm looking to produce a movie in your wheelhouse, I have money. What do I have to prove to like, do I need some kind of document that proves I have money, or do I just kind of say like I can figure out the financing on my end? Like, is there something that's more like they need something tangible in order for me to make like kind of move on to the next step? Or can I sort of phrase it as I'll I'll figure that out if you tell me what you need first, kind of thing.
Okay, so these are all good questions. I jotted these down because I think there's like 3 points in
Okay.
here to chat about. You bring up a great question. If Steven Spielberg called you today, what would you show? What would you have? And that I think is the critical answer that every writer needs to, and this goes to directors as well, or ideal producers or anybody like that. Um, but like, what would you? That's where I go back to like, okay, what do you need to sort of like start putting yourself out there? And my answer to that is going back. I think 2 to 3 finished scripts, like ready to go scripts that are about 94, 98 pages in length and are all kind of about the same-ish genre because that shows consistency. And I would add to that like five, at least five, maybe 10 like ready to go concepts, which could be like a log line. But it's as a writer, I'm sure you or anyone who is a writer has their little place that they jot down ideas, the phone or a book or whatever. And like just and the purpose here is that you're always updating that what I'll call arsenal or what you call portfolio. It's the same idea. It's the thing you have that is when you are asked that question, what do you have? You have a lot of shit to talk about. You could fill a 30-minute meeting with fresh things that are and as executive A on the other side of the table asks questions, you can undulate and shift and pivot and find content in your portfolio that matches. So you finish your third script? Great. Do you stop? No. You take one of your ready to go ideas and you start writing that. And then whichever, now you have 4 scripts, but whichever one is the weaker of them, get rid of it and just kind of, I think 3 good scripts ready to go at all times. I'm not saying delete it, just like maybe that's not the one you're leading with anymore. So that's, I think, how to approach it as a writer. And again, I'm saying point blank, I don't think any of those projects as they exist in your starting out period will sell. It's more to sell that you are a writing machine. You're a powerhouse at writing. You're constantly churning out stuff and you're constantly like putting new stuff out there. I would apply that same logic to somebody who wants to be a director or a cinematographer is to always be shooting, always have a new reel. And yes, you can just create reels of whatever. It's fine to do short films. It's build an arsenal of stuff so that when me or somebody else or anybody in the production side of things goes to Google you or look you up, you have a website, you have links to stuff, you have visual flashy images, and you just appear as a professional, serious person ready to deliver at a moment's notice. You're available to work, you have links to stuff you've done. I've seen a lot of websites now for writers where they have like 10 pages from their script. And many directors or DPs have links to like various sizzles and all that. IMDb is a great resource, obviously. Like it's worth the investment to spruce up your IMDb page. It just shows that you're serious about what you do. And in today's world, you get to control that narrative in the sense of this is what I want the world to see of me and how I want them to see me. And you can control your social media handles so that you're pushing out those things. So I'd put it that's how I would handle the writing side in terms of like, what do you need? And I'd also apply that same conceptual logic to being a director, an actor, a musician, if you want to do composing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, um, the marketing aspect, the direct to consumer aspect, which in this case is more like you're reaching out and how do you make contact with people? I'm going to say it like this. There's the old expression, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. There's the adage that I use, which is when I'm in sales mode and I'm trying to get content sold, I try to be politely annoying, where my email just kind of keeps going to the not in a rude, over the top, stalkerish way at all. So please, like, don't take what I'm saying out of context, but like keeping in tabs with people, treating your list when you have a list of emails from executives in from American film market or wherever, like talk to them like your network, like pitch, like post to them, like not every day, but like every couple of weeks, like when you have a new script that you finished, like, hey, just finished this great new script, it's about XYZ, and I'd love to present it to you. And it's like over time, this will not happen. It's not like that's the biggest thing is it's like, first off, people who are writers tend to be quite introverted. And that idea of breaking out of your shell and being politely annoying for a lot of writers is sending one email. And it's like, well, they just didn't respond. And it's like, people you're talking to are fucking busy. Like they're busy. And
Yeah.
we're doing it nicely. We're doing like 30 movies a year. And that's not even including the acquisitions we do, which are, separate. And it's like that's a lot of content. And that's a lot of emails in my inbox. So I certainly am guilty of like, getting a lot of emails and just getting sidetracked. But people do, if there's a more of a consistent churn, you do take notice of familiar names that keep popping up. And every once in a while, an executive will, who is this person? Like, and if their links are all very clearly in their email, that's very helpful because you can just click website. You can, and then you go to them and you're like, this person's real. And then that might be the thing that incites executive whomever at whatever company to forward it to head of production at wherever that they work with and say, talk to this person. And that's the thing you're trying to get to is it's like it doesn't happen overnight. You won't come up with 5 screenplays and 10 concepts overnight, and you won't build a network overnight. And a lot of writing for the green light and a lot of mastering the pitch were purely about like slow and steady, just that doing a little bit every day, sending one email a day, not a mass email to 1,000 people, like actually direct the email to people and staying on top of it and communicating what's going on because it is a world of out of sight, out of mind. And if you send one email, you're a blip on the radar. And, I'd love to say it's all about like talent and all of that, but it's like getting somebody to like respond to you in today's world is very challenging. Getting somebody to open your screenplay and read it is like that is a time commitment you are asking. So like you better be ready to deliver and your content better be ready to go. Now, the third thing you'd mentioned about like, I have money. You don't need to hold up bank statements at all. It's nothing like that. It's not a passport application getting immigration status in another country and you have to verify like your financial standings at all. It is purely just like, look, I people who sell houses, real estate agents, car dealers, like at like high-end luxury dealerships. They know when people come in just to like test drive a brand new high-end car. They know, they can tell
Yeah.
because the kinds of questions that get asked, the kinds of demeanor somebody has walking in, they can tell like this is a serious person who's actually looking to potentially buy this. Doesn't mean they will, but they're like actually considering doing this and they're thinking like, why do I need a Lamborghini when I'm going to go get groceries? Like that doesn't make any sense. But like they want the car, and so they can tell the difference between somebody who's serious about doing it versus somebody who's not. And I would say
Okay.
in my field, I do get random like, hey, I got a shit ton of money and want to make movies. It's like it's kind of weirdly phrased. But if it's more of a we have this, and it's if it's presented more in a way of like, we're looking to produce some films um, in a genre that your company works in, and you're realistic about budgets, like, so the math in terms of like, what are the budgets that company produces at? Then it starts to kind of like feel like, okay, you've done your research into that company, and then you go present it as we're thinking of producing a film like these and want to talk to you about being the distribution partner. Can we have a dialogue about that and just sort of chat about what the workflow would be, how that would work, timelines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it seems more like an opportunity for the executive on the other side.
No, okay. Cool. I guess what is okay. And that brought to light a few like where you said like some guy says I have a bunch of money and ready to make movies. I actually have had like the same thing happen to me in the comic space to where it's like people will come to me and just be like, I have this idea, and can you just like turn it into a thing and make me back money? And if it requires me to spend money, I'll spend it. And it is just kind of like I have to hold back and be like, I would gladly take your money, but just know that like there's no guarantee you'll get any of it back. Because just like in films with comics, it's like there you could the publisher and the comic shops and the distributor can take everything and you never get anything after they do their expenses. Um, but that brings me to, so if let's just say I'm from a producer's perspective, and I'm gonna what is most important to you in the sense, like if I were to come to you and I say like I have, should I basically be asking you kind of, because to me it seems like if I can learn what you want, I can easily try to fill in your blanks, because and then so let's just say that you're like, I'm looking for this. Once I hear what you say you need, is it sort of, how important is then trying to get, let's just say, talent attached, or like above the line, like the well-known recognizable talent? Is it more important that you have just the story and the genre, or I guess it might depend on the studio, but like what should be the next step once I learn what you want? What should I be trying to find? Is it a writer or is it the talent?
No offense to anyone who's on the writing side, but the writing is sort of later in the process in this sense.
Okay,
Now,
okay.
look, okay, it I'm going to say it like this. It is not a one size fits all. And I think of it, and I've certainly made this analogy in numerous other conversations like this. I think of the process like dating, which is like there's not like there's not a rule book necessarily. There's not a workflow necessarily. There's kind of a general pattern people follow, but it's like at the end of the day, it really is sort of like a chemistry. Does it work? Does it make sense? Do the people want to work together and collaborate kind of thing? And what I mean by that is like if you're reaching out in a professional way and you're basically saying like, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, and it seems very much in alignment with what you, distributor, are trying to do, I'd love to sort of explore that. You know, if we're bringing, and I'm saying this from the producer side, if we're bringing revenue to the table, we have backers who are serious and they're willing to invest some money, like maximum, and I'm just going to throw out random numbers here, low budget. Like, let's say they're willing to invest like $300,000 into a movie and we want to produce it. And that seems very much in alignment with what you, Max, the distributor, are doing, you know, and it's a genre that you like to do. How can we collaborate? Can we produce a film, but with your guidance where you're kind of like letting us know what you need, but the financial risk is sort of on us, you know, does that, how can we make that work? And then, you know, when it comes to cast and all that, when you're talking sub $1 million, you don't need major names. In fact, major names can really cause some problems. And some of them, the kinds that you can afford at some of those levels, you know, they don't move the needle a ton.
Yeah.
You know, so it's what I say. What I mean by that is like if you start getting real talent, and by talent I mean like, you know, they're always going to be fully union, and that makes your entire production union. And then you're now paying a lot more revenue because it's a fully unionized film. And then a lot of the profit you're going to make goes to residuals and gets eroded in that way. That's a hard thing to sell to an investment company, or not an investment company, I'm sorry, any investors that are willing to fund the money in. Now, that's
Yeah.
sort of a traditional approach most people think they need to do, but truth is you don't. What I like to say is at the sub $1 million level, think of it more like you're looking for familiar faces in these types of movies. So if you look up Christmas romance movies, if you look up horror films, if you look up any of these kinds of, you will see recurring faces that are just like the common go-tos in that space. That's kind of all you need.
Hmm. Okay.
You don't need big attachments, not at the sub $1 million zone. When you start getting more, when you cross like a million and a half, okay, when you cross like 750, $800,000, your whole movie just will, you'll start to become, you'll be a fully unionized film. When you become fully unionized, you know, it quickly like doubles your budget. Okay, so if you're going to double your budget, but the revenue is still going to be lower than that, that doesn't make sense. So how do you skew that? Well, you can really beef up the talent. And if you really beef up the talent, your budget goes way up. But now you can start getting the movie into theaters and you can play a totally different kind of game. But that's not the game you're going to be playing when you're starting out. Like that's I don't even play in that space because it's like it's a whole monster in and of itself. So when you're talking like building a career in the indie movie space, you don't need to be chasing big talents like that. Some names do like peak interest, but not a ton of them. And if you want a good filter of who to use to pique interest, just get a household name. And a household name doesn't have to be Tom Cruise celebrity A-lister. A household name can be that person everyone knows from that TV show 12 years ago that is totally not working today.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that name because we grew up in that time era. Look at TV movies on Lifetime, on Hallmark, on any of these. They're filled with them. And those are the kinds of names that will maybe move the needle. It's not, and this is a key point, it's not the shows they were in. That's a big mistake a lot of indies make is they go, oh, well, so and so was in this big show from 10 years ago. It doesn't matter. What's the name? If the name is big enough that everyone goes, oh, yeah, that person, I know them. They used to do stuff. I don't know what stuff, but they used to do it. Now all of a sudden that's a name you can do, but you don't need the name.
So that's why you see, especially in like you reference aging action hero comeback story movies, you see
Yes.
Dolph Lundgren in a bunch of those indie action films and stuff like that.
Yes. Liam Neeson is definitely one of those. Uh, which, he's had an amazing career, but it's like he's started to do a lot of those kinds of movies
Yeah,
too,
that's where I didn't start to notice that until the past like 10 years that how much content even very famous people do like of that like and I did like yeah before I got into this I didn't even really realize there was such a whole array of films with stars but just not like the now you understand or at least from my perspective like why there's like true A list or like why being like the most trending person now is what matters to back up a little bit that like reminds me back of my career and we were talking about agents like my experience was basically like when I was trending in the film world for literally like 6 weeks. And once that momentum left, like I had agents and managers reaching out trying to be like, we will represent you for this property because I had a hit book. And then it was just sort of in the ether. And I guess once no studios bit and that's where that's when I really started trying to dive into the back end of all this stuff. I was like, why did it stop? Like, why did everybody like, this, it was as if this person was just waiting on this person to respond. And when that person didn't respond, everything just fell apart. And I'm like, well, why couldn't you just get this person or this sub thing? But that's, now I'm learning on like the back end of all these things is that I guess that is the catch 22, that it's kind of, that people are only interested when something has momentum, I guess, at that level. If it's not a genre thing, what matters is like what people think is hot or like kind of the trending moment. And if that goes away, or if whatever momentum was building it to where it was like, and no one officially becomes attached to anything, now it's just sort of in the back to where it's just kind of now the thing that happened in the past. Um, I don't really have a question there, but
No, 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 but let's piggyback off that for a minute because you're spot on correct. Everybody likes to jump onto the moving train. Um, that's 100% correct. Okay, agents, real quick. They are great. Agents aren't there to broker deals for you. They're there to be the wall separating people with money from you. And if there is interest in you, they will happily play hardball and drive up money and drive up rates, trying to get the best deal possible because one side with money wants you. The second they've moved on to something else, the agent will get in front of them and block them and say, you can't talk to them until you talk to me, and here are the terms we have to do. Now, if you are A-list celebrity, well, that's amazing, you know, because people really want A-list celebrities. But when you're down deeper in the trenches, let's say, you will have little pop moments like that where suddenly something you have is in need. And agents, you know, I have seen, I have witnessed, and I have dealt with situations where an agent has totally like screwed the deal because they just pushed it too far. They just dragged it out too long or insisted on points. And then like I have literally heard calls where it's like, we're done, we're moving to the next. So a lot of these companies have like backup projects they'll get involved with. Now, I'm going to say this. It sounds like, and I'm just assuming, it sounds like a property was selling well, and then sometimes when those trains start to move, it's like, hey, there could be a good, like, maybe a movie or a series here. So let's see if we can do the shopping rights. And basically, it's a quick, like, let's just see if we can shop this to a few studios and get somebody to nibble on the concept and see if we can drag it out further. And then they go out and they're like, hey, we got this cool new property. And then their contact at whatever location just kind of says, nah. And then it moved, and then that's it.
That's it. It's
And then it
over.
just move. Then they just move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And so I think a big question there. First off, there's two questions. How can you be that property? That's a hard one to answer. But what I like to do instead is say, rather than chase that game, because I am not a trend chaser, I don't try to put all my energy into fads. I focus way more on what's going to consistently work year on year. Because in our world of producing content, whether you're writing a comic, which takes a lot of time, energy, and focus, whether you're producing a movie, which takes a lot of time, energy, and focus, like you want it to be sellable when it's completed. You don't want to put all this time, energy, and effort, and on day 3 it was really popular, and then on day 127 when you're finished, like nobody gives a shit anymore. So how can you keep, and so that's sort of where in writing for the Greenlight I focused on that. It's like, what are the core genres that seem to just constantly be in need all the time? And it's sort of that idea of like what's going to be the popular thing in summer 2026? I don't have the foggiest idea. I could not tell you. But you know, I produce a lot of Christmas romance movies. I'm executive producer of a lot of Christmas romance movies. I can tell you what, there's going to be a Christmas in 2026. And there is going to be a need on many channels and platforms for a cozy romance story that is just very ad friendly, TV safe, that they can start watching in the background the day after Thanksgiving. I will confidently say that. And that is where I think the opportunity really lies for anybody truly trying. I'm not saying Christmas romance per se. I'm saying focus on genres that are just consistently interesting for the Hollywood system or the international system to bank on. And I guess that goes to an earlier point you made. All attention focuses on studio content. Like, I don't know how many movies actually get professionally produced and distributed a year. I'll be lowballing it and say it's like 2,000. I'm not talking about the endless hours of junk that get put up on YouTube every second. I'm talking like actually produced quality programming. I would say it's probably 2,000 movies a year, let's say, as a conservative estimate from the
At the
United States.
studio level?
I'm saying across the board, including
Oh, okay.
indies. I would say
Okay.
studios.
Okay.
You're talking a much smaller number. I would say studios account for. I'm ballparking this just based on what I kind of think from markets. 5, 7, 8% of the total output of content comes from studios. Let's
Okay.
ballpark that range. So
Yeah.
you're already in a 95 to 5% world. All classic Pareto distribution. All the attention is on the studio stuff. All of it. 95% is like low budget indie stuff. And let's even say another 5% is like 24, which is technically independent, but
Yeah, that's where I say that's mainstream independent. Yeah,
it's
I'd almost say
mainstream
that's
independent.
studio
Yeah.
level.
For
Yeah.
us, you and I, and anybody listening, like a $30 million movie is not an independent movie. Like it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not. So when you get out of that top, let's just be super loose and say it's 90% of the movies are like those expensive ones. Let's just say 85% are under $1 million. And yet that's the vast majority of content that gets produced. And of that content, most of it fits into those kinds of buckets that I've outlined. So like romance movies, uh, creature features, that kind of stuff. And why that's good for writers, why that's good for producers is that there are whole companies built on just releasing creature feature content or just focused on family driven content or just focused on romance content. And then to your big question, can you blindly reach out? Yes, because they're like really in need of new content. And if you're coming to them like, I have scripts, I want to produce, I have investors, but I need a distribution deal, like then that conversation becomes way more interesting because guess what? On our side, we need a lot of content to stay relevant. We need to constantly be churning out new films. We need good ones. It's not like you can just go produce anything, but you know, we reach out to distribution channels that have an audience to feed. And so they need new content.
I I know we're approaching an hour. So I don't want to hold you too long, but I could talk a lot deeper, but I kind of want to end on this sort of final question, even though it's going to be complex. But like, uh, if yeah, kind of to sum up this discussion and your books and stuff, it's like, especially from a writer's perspective, our best bet is to go to these gold mine genres that are kind of just blanketly always, people are always looking for content in those genres. They're very sub niche, I guess. The creature feature, not just horror, but specifically a creature feature kind of thing. Write great scripts in those buckets, and then can go there to go directly to the places that produce or actually distribute that content. So here's where I get questions from people, and this is the kind of the barrier of where you lose the artist once I start to dive into this stuff, because they'll look at a film that's on Tubi and say, "Well, I don't want my movie to to just be this kind of out in the unknown world blanket of the other stuff. I want to be at this high level." And it's like, okay, yeah, yeah, maybe eventually. But my question, I guess, more direct is like, when let's just say I spent, I think what I have is just a brilliant script, but it's in your genre. Let's just say it's a woman in peril thriller. Um, do distributors know when they get that? And let's just say somehow it gets greenlit in a sense or whatever, and it starts to get made. If it does happen to be like really good, do the distributors at your level, not necessarily yours, but at this like independent blanket, the 90%, do they take extra efforts to try to elevate the ones they think that are like could be at a higher level or anything, or do they kind of just throw it all together, they stick to their plan, they don't treat any more or worse? Are they all sort of equal in their mind? Is the same kind of just, this one fits this bill, equal to the one that from the writer thinks like this one is elevated, it could get a theatrical release? Like, do the independent distributors judge their own films and try to give merit more to certain ones than others, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so the short answer is this. Yes. You have to think about it like this. Okay, I grew up, as I said, I fell in love with movies at a very young age. And it was a really like just a paradigm shift moment in my life when I realized like, wow, I can have a career. I can do this for the rest of my life. This is great. Some of the best memories for me in my career, like a benchmark moment for me was the first time I went to the Cannes Film Festival. Because growing up in Ohio, that was like, wow, like if I ever get there, I have made it. And
Yeah.
so going there for the first time was just like, I'm sure what it felt like for a lot of kids to go to Disneyland for the first time. It's like, for me, it was just like an extremely important milestone in turning fantasy into reality. Okay, anybody who's ever worked in theater or who's cast a movie or even an independent movie, like when you're auditioning actors and one of them just walks in the room, you can sense it that they're right for the part before they've opened their mouth. I don't know how to describe it other than it's a gut instinct. You just feel this is the person who would be great at the role. Okay. Um, so I'm going to say it like this. Absolutely. You do sense like this is a really good project. This is better than the others. And it's a twofold thing because it sounds like we just care about money, but that is true, because you do need to recoup the money and you do need to, it is a business at the end of the day. But yes, we need to hit numbers and revenue is very important, but it's also like growth of the company. It's elevating, because if you have a really quality film, then that means you can get better talent on future projects. Um, it's so the short answer is yes. When you feel you have something that is really good, um, we absolutely do our best to ensure that it gets the best placement possible. We talk about it differently with our distribution channels and everything else. When it comes to it, so we do not, and I'm going to say it like this: we give every movie the chance to be great because, again, we want to make the most revenue possible. Now, some films are just easy at that. Others require a little bit more work. And there is a point of diminishing returns where it's like, you can put all the time you want in the world into this project, and like, it's just never going to reach above a certain level. And you just know that.
Yeah.
And, so there is an evaluation process, yes. But, you know, any distributor, first off, you don't get into this business if you were not very passionate about film at some point in your life and
Yeah.
really love and value it because you've built a career working in it. And yes, you at the end of the day, you got to pay your bills. So revenue does start to become important at a point. And I think anybody who's transitioned from being a 17-year-old, I really want to make movies, and they make movies with their friends, to I'm a 27-year-old who now wants to produce films, has seen that transition of no one's working for free for me anymore. I got to actually pay people, and they expect to be paid to show up to do stuff. And you have to factor that in. And that kind of goes everywhere else in life. Um, so I'm just going to say, like, it is art, it is commerce, and they do weave together. And I think it's really important to remember that basically every Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo masterpiece was a commissioned work by somebody. And, the Mona Lisa was somebody saying, "Hey, paint a picture of my wife." Like it's a thing where it's like that is kind of how art and commerce works. And we can have many, many debates about like, is that good or not? But that's kind of just it is what it is. And I've used this analogy many, many times, but it's like, there's numerous architects who have brilliant ideas, but like they do have to think about gravity and building codes and like laws, and they do have budgets because they cannot build buildings that just have indefinite, you know, costs to making them. Like there are constraints in life, and there are constraints in every industry, and these are the constraints in ours. And I think actually, rather than looking at the constraints as obstacles working against you, think of them as filter points that allow you to navigate. So if I'm driving my car down the road, I have to accept that like I'm going to be a lot more efficient at getting from point A to point B if I stay in my lane and follow traffic laws rather than trying to like off-road over my neighbor's yards. Like I'll just go faster, I'll be more efficient, and I'm not going to get pulled over and ticketed. Like it is what it is in life. You mentioned women in peril thrillers. I did want to mention this because I call them gold mine genres. That's a term I made up, so it's not like an industry thing. So if you go talking to other distributors, I don't think anybody else calls them that. But so maybe in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have called them that in the book. But either way, I call them that because to me, it's
It's
like
it's so
yeah,
catchy.
it's catchy. Yeah, it's like I thought like, oh, that's great, and then it's like, well, but if you were to go to like some other producer and say that, they'd be like, what are you talking? So anyway, I want to preface that. But I want to give a great example of this because you mentioned women in peril thrillers specifically. Okay, women in peril thrillers. When I was starting out, and when I was working at Mar Vista Entertainment, we produced a ton at Mar Vista Entertainment. We produced some here at Nicely Entertainment as well. The numbers on them started to dwindle a bit in terms of like the volume that Lifetime was producing, let's say, and the volume that the international marketplace was buying. So this is a fantastic example of like, why do you call it a gold mine trusted genre if the numbers fluctuate? All stock prices of Coca-Cola have fluctuated over the years, but in the long term, the aggregate, it is a go-to trusted genre. And I think it's a great position to make there because people aren't watching the Lifetime thrillers on Lifetime anymore, but the thriller audience has shifted more to like those vertical dramas, those like micro drama series of you see on Real Short and Drama Box and all of those, and those are getting a lot of attention. And it's like, okay, traditional broadcast media is clearly dwindling down. Streaming is going up. And these micro dramas, I mean, are they a fad? Are they a long-term thing? Are they a new rights category? I don't think people really know yet, but what I'm seeing is that the female in peril, woman in peril thriller is alive and well. You just don't find as many of them in traditional media outlets, but the script, the need, the writing talent, it's required because there are tons of them being produced in the vertical space, for instance. Um, if a filmmaker is trying to get their career kickstarted, working in avenues like that or working on the lower budget stuff, or to your point, somebody sees their script and like wants it up there on Tubi, not kind of down the line. Going back to where I started, when I would read about Coppola and Scorsese and all those guys starting out their careers, it's like they were all shooting for Roger Corman, like just making
Yeah, yeah.
schlock junk movies, but they were learning the ropes and they could prove I can deliver a movie. I can deliver a movie under budget, on time, that actually, you know, generates revenue. And that's how you build a career. You gotta they always do like the fake it till you make it. They don't actually mean fake it till you make it. They mean like prove you can do the work before you expect to get paid for it. Prove you
Yeah,
can do the
yeah.
work before you expect somebody to hand you a contract.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're not actually faking it. You're doing it. You're just doing it on your own. It's kind of, I mean, it's like what I do
Yes.
in my life. It's like I have a day job, uh, but I've joked that I've been faking being like an expert at these things forever. But it's like I just spend my nighttime doing the things that I like. And over time, it's yeah, it's not really faking. It's like it's a lot of work. It's
Oh
just
yeah, yeah.
it's not I'm not always being paid to do it. It's basically like I'm actually spending money to learn these things. And it's like, but it's still an investment. It's almost like an investment in myself as a creator. It's like if I really, and that's the thing is this is where I talk to, other people, writers especially. It's like if you really think you're that good, you can prove that. Like but I think that that's where I kind of come at it to where it's like where you lose sort of, not that your books are depressing, but I think like when the illusion is broken of like how the business of film actually works, um, so it's like you're trying to write something great that comes out of your head, and you're spending so much time trying to turn that into a thing, and then you learn like, well, in actuality, that's actually kind of the least important part. It's like the writing, or not the least important, but it just that like you're saying, it comes later,
Yeah.
and that what should have happened, or not necessarily should have, but taking it from the other perspective of filling the need that other people want, specifically the people that make money selling films or whatever, figure out what they need and write to tailor to them. But then once you are put into that box, that's where it's like, but then that ruins your vision, or whatever the brilliance that you thought you had is like, it's as if like because you have to do it for somebody else, it takes it away. But my point in saying this is like you should be able to prove yourself as a writer by being able to take something like that and turning it into something good. And that's why I asked earlier, like, well, what's the reward for doing that? Like, can you still have it be a breakout? And that's why I said Women in Peril thriller, because one of the biggest film success stories was The Invisible Man, which was that woman. I would call that a woman in peril thriller, even though I guess it's also qualified as like a horror. But I think that was a whatever it was, a $10 million budget that made $1 billion. And it's like if you really like took that concept, it's like you could write something that good. So that's why I was wondering, like, if I were to write something for a distributor that's not known for producing something at that level at 10 million, but if I wrote it and it was made for 800,000, um, could it then eventually be projected into the atmosphere to where it could become a super success, not necessarily at the $1 billion level, but at least like, you know, be more than just like you were saying in the beginning, the distributor goes, it'll probably make like this amount. So if you can produce it for this much, everybody's happy. But from a writer's perspective, it would be, well, what if I took all the risk of don't pay me, but I get a percentage if you can bring it up to, if it goes up to here, because I'm going to write the greatest script ever. That was why I was asking that, because that's where I lose myself and other people to where the desire to get into this space is lost. And that's where I think, like with your books, it's like if you're really trying to be a screenwriter, probably go this route, as far as like writing for the distributors rather than for yourself. But that goes against everything you ever hear, because everyone tells you write for yourself, write what you know is good, and all that stuff. I could talk forever, but um, if you have any closing notes.
Yeah, I mean, on that, the what I write about is sort of I guess what I'm going to call like this is the real world game plan of how to get like your foot in the actual door of the industry. And I know what you were talking about in the sense of like, write for yourself. Um, okay, I'm gonna give an example. This is, typical college professor advice, um, which is that it was about the mechanics of being on set. Okay, so if you have an actor doing their dialogue, and they're doing the scene, and the audio recordist is saying, I can't hear them well. His advice was find a new audio recordist or get a better microphone, but don't like hinder the actor's moment. And what I'm trying to say is, okay, that's great in theory, but at the end of the day, like we need their voice. Like you need you do have to sometimes say, okay, I get what you're trying to do here, but this is kind of like what we need on this side. It's sometimes, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a compromise between the artistic vision of how you think things are supposed to be and how things are supposed to work in the real world. Like you should just, going back to the beginning, you should, in that vision, write a script you're passionate about. People will sense the passion from your script and invest endless amounts of money into your project, and you go make it. That's the vision we get sold. And the reality is, what I'm trying to say is that this is okay. These are terrible closing statements. I'm all over the place. But let me say it like this. If somebody on the creative side is trying to talk to somebody on the business side, this is the question you need to be able to answer. Point blank. Your money is better in this project than putting it into a CD at a bank. Because a CD at a bank today has a fixed interest rate, and you can very clearly calculate that in 5 years it will be worth X. Why is their money better with you than there? That's guaranteed. So how can you prove to me? And if you go, well, Blair Witch Project cost this and it made, oodles of money, or like Rebel Without a, with the Rodriguez movie, El Mariachi cost $7,000 and it made this. And it's like, Not exactly. That's not exactly how those things work. Studios pumped a shit ton of money into both of those projects to make them sellable films. How, if I give you that same amount of money, will it change? And what you're really trying to answer there is that you're making a project for a reasonable amount of money that has a verifiable track record of of earning at a certain level so that the investment makes sense. So that like go back to Star Wars, for example. It's like a classic example of this. When they made that movie, they were not making it with the expectation that it was going to be making becoming what Star Wars is in today's pop culture. They were producing that movie with the expectation of, you know, movies like this generally make about $16 million in the box office. So if we produce a movie that's about $10 million, it'll be reasonably profitable. It just happened to absolutely explode into the biggest hit ever in 1977. So of course it made sequels and the franchise was built and all that kind of stuff. But the intention from the very beginning was reasonably budgeted action film. That was the intention. Reasonably budgeted means in correlation to about what these movies make, does it make sense? So if you're an independent filmmaker and you want to go, and I'm trying to tell people like not to go write their passion project or produce a film they're super excited to produce. What I'm trying to say is like, maybe that's not like the best thing to go out of the gate with. Maybe take a step back, look at the industry and say, where are your actual like open door opportunities to do the thing you want to do with your life and build a career. Once you've done a few films and you actually have a track record and you like can produce 5, 10, 15 movies that have all been reasonably profitable. I'm not saying every single one, but like, you're consistently outputting good content. Guess what? You will have so many network opportunities to go to people and say, like, I want to produce this project now. It's out of the little bit out of the box. You now have a whole network of people to broker a deal with. I guess that's kind of what I'm saying is like, I'm not trying to tell people not to produce the films they're passionate about. I'm saying build the career and then go out and do that a little bit later when you have the connections, you have the ability to negotiate the contracts in your favor, you have the know-how of how the industry actually operates so that you can get the best deals possible for yourself, for your crew, and everything else. I guess that's kind of the all over the place answer.
No, it makes perfect sense. Thank you. That did remind me of if you have time for one more question, I was gonna
Yeah, yeah,
say,
yeah.
um, like this is hypothetical. I'm not actually doing this, but let's just say, um, I'm coming to you, and I know the kind of films you distribute. Let's just say it's romance Christmas movies. And I say, I've got 3 books that I didn't write, but I can get the rights to, that all are the best Christmas romance books I know. What would you need then from me to like greenlight those film projects?
And probably in that case, I'd want to make sure you actually had the rights. So probably some kind of verification that you actually had the right to shop those titles. And then a clear understanding that if we were to do a deal, you and I, on that, that our payment to you would be kind of like locked at that, so that any agreement you make with the author is your own responsibility. I don't want to inherit risk. I don't
Yeah.
want to unintentionally add risk to my portfolio. So, and that goes back to the closing statements I guess I was making is it's like we need a certain number of movies to produce every single year. We need them to be as risk averse as possible. So the more layers of problems you can take off of the plate, the better. So if I'm being presented with 4 screenplays, the one that best matches what we need is going to be the one that's interesting. If I'm talking to 4 producers, the one who can produce the most competently and at the level we need them to is going to be the one that is the most interesting for us to reach a deal with. So in your case, you are coming to something, you are coming to the table with something interesting. Books are verifiable. I can look them up. They have sales data on them. And I can even get a good sense of like what the screenplay would likely be, what the key art would likely be. That really helps me envision it. But I also want to make sure I'm not entering into a deal where you're selling me something you don't have the right to sell me, or that I'm unintentionally getting into a deal that's going to cost me way more money than expected down the line.
Okay. So it's basically like rights and an understanding of what it's going to cost, or I guess at least like what I'm expecting as far as like to get paid or something like that. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. It's being clear on, do you have permission to present the project? Do you have permission to enter into a deal on behalf of it? What is the project? It kind of just gets down to like really basic bullet point stuff. And I talk about in Mastering the Pitch and Introduction to Distribution, in Introduction to Media Distribution. I should really get the titles of my own books proper.
No, you're good.
Um, yeah, but both of those kind of go into that process of like, what do you need to pitch a project?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the core details. It's what is it? What genre is it? Who is it coming from? Are the rights cleared? What is the budget? What is the expected projection? And if you don't know the projection, that's okay. Distributors can ballpark that very easily. But it's sort of just that what is the overall business opportunity? And I guess that's the thing. Yes, it's a creative industry. Writing is creative, even producing is creative. It's constantly just it's being creative with problem solving and everything else. You have to have a real creative vision and creative drive to get through all of the bullshit and nonsense to make those things a reality. It's hard work. But at the end, it's got to be sellable and it has to be something that other people actually want to engage with and watch. And if it's not meeting that core basic, then it's not going to find an audience.
I think that covers it. In reality, I just need to go and read your other two. I only fully finished your first book, and I never really. I mean, they're dense books, and like so, I all the rest that I could ask you, you probably answer the rest of these in your own books. So I'll just go back and read through there. Thank you for all this. This has been a gold mine of information. I feel like this will be even though it might not be the most viewed on my channel, it's definitely going to be the one of the most valuable. I think when it comes to how much information you put in there that's tangible and practical for the amount of time we've been on, I think it's perfect. So thanks a lot for doing this again.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to talk to you. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for the kind
Oh, and
words. And
if your own book, the one you're writing, be sure to reach back out and we'll hype it up whenever it launches.
okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm early stages, so that's at least a year. But
Okay, well, then we'll do
I
we'll do a part two in a year whenever you're ready to launch that, and we'll go even deeper into your new one. Do you know what the new one's going to be called or about?
I okay, it's the working title now is Producing for Profit. The idea of
That's what
it,
I want to know.
yeah, it's essentially everything we talked about in this. It's the idea of it is like answering some of these questions, like what do movies actually generate? Like what are the real world like returns? What are realistic budgets to produce at to ensure that? Because if you go Google like what does a certain movie cost to make, you'll get all kinds, like the answer to how much should it cost isn't, well, this is what I need, so that's what it should cost. It's like, no, you should really think about like where are the actual revenues going to be? And then how do you achieve that? How can you shoot cost effectively? How do you relate that back to a script? How do you make a script production ready? How many speaking roles should be in it so you can make sure you're at the right budget level? All of those kinds of things we're going to dive into. I'm trying not to make it as dense, but unfortunately, it seems like it's going to be equally as dense as the others.
Those are the best ones though.
Wh-
Maybe that's the thing is what's actually the most valuable to someone like me is probably not what sells the best to the broad market. Because like the most people that are trying to get into filmmaking or reading, producing for profit are not die hard like I am, to learn the nitty gritty parts. They're more like, oh, I just kind of want to learn a bit about this. And then once you get too deep, they're like, ah, this is over my head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm excited
Well,
for that one. Yeah, we're definitely doing a part two when that book comes out.
well, I got the notes right here, so it is a work in progress. So every day I'm pounding away at that one. But look, I really appreciate you reaching out. I will reach out once that gets close to the publication time period. But I'm gonna have to jump on a call. But great talking to you. Thank you for your time. And yeah.
You as well. Yeah, thanks a lot. I'll get back to what you're doing and